please have the GLLU leaders and the filmmakers to join me for our panel discussion? David, Luis, Veronica, just come and grab a seat. Rita, Mario, Gregorio, Roland.
It was a frontier town.
Who am I missing here?
A place for people to come and read.
We have 9 panelists. That's a lot of people, but we have plenty of time and we're going to hear from everybody. Who got the chills watching this, by the way? Incredible, incredible storytelling. And I'm privileged to say that this is my second time watching this. This is the long version. And I must say que todos se ven super pollitos, eh? Se ven super bien. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cristina Sanchez. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for Altameth Health Services. That is where I've been for the past 2 years. Some of you may know me from my previous position at Univision. I used to be the Community Affairs Director, which is where I got to know Roland Palencia back in 19 bleep, is what we used to say, in his work at Clínica Romero. And like GLLU and what these extraordinary leaders and filmmakers coming together and the friendships to make this happen, I think is so, so important. At Altameth, if you don't know who we are, we're a large community health network. I want to recognize my team that's here that oversees our HIV prevention program. We've been around since 54 years now, again, born out of social justice and equity. We continue to see it, but we continue to fight, which is what brings us to see these tremendous leaders. And I have an entire script here. Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos GLLU was founded in 1981, only a dozen years after the Stonewall Rebellion and only a couple of years before the HIV/AIDS pandemic began to ravage the LGBTQ communities. GLLU was the greater Los Angeles area's first major queer Latina organization, and the film chronicles events surrounding GLLU at a pivotal time in the history of LGBTQ equality, women's rights, and civil rights movements that shaped the destinies of GLLU's impact on various communities for the decades to come. Tonight, we welcome our GLLU leader and panelists and filmmakers. And please raise your hand. I know we see you on your names. Mario Novoa, who's a professional filmmaker and educator who recently produced Nelly Queen, The Life and Times of Jose Sarria, UNIDAD, Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, now on PBS. What a great feat, by the way. Muchas felicidades. And he continues to produce films around the Latina and or LGBTQ experience through Film Bliss Studios. Gracias. Gregorio Davila. Gracias, Gregorio. Writer, producer, director, and editor, he, him, has written and produced, edited, and directed Nancy from East Side Clover and Jean Cordova, Butch's Lies and Feminism, LA Queer History, which won a Public Media Award, NETA, and a MIPCOM Diversity Award. Unidad, Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos is his latest film. Muchas felicidades. Rita Gonzalez is a podcaster at LGBTQ+ for the Out Agenda and Radio Q GLLU on KPFK. Rita sits on the board of the Directors of Bienestar Human Services and is a devoted community activist. She is the recipient of many awards for her activism, including the Los Angeles LGBT Center's LACE Award, CSW Pride Women of the Year, Honor 41, West Hollywood Rainbow, and the Melissa Etheridge Award. She was awarded the 2 Los Angeles Emmys for her work on AIDS segment on LA Kids and Children's Programs. Rita, muchas felicidades. An Emmy Award winner. 2 Emmys, by the way, not a small feat. I have 2, by the way, so mi tocayan Emmys. Luis Jacinto was recognized in 2020. Luis? He was recognized in 2020 as a cultural trailblazer by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. His work includes the Los Angeles punk rock music scene from the late 70s. We could tell from your taste in music, by the way. Queer activism and the forging of queer activism of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. His upcoming work titled Copy Machine Manifestos, Artists Who Make Signs, will be showcased in November in 2023. And at the Brooklyn Museum. Muchas felicidades. Laura Esquivel is a seasoned political and legislative strategist. Yes, bienvenida, Laura. With more than 40 years of grassroots electoral and policy advocacy experience, she is currently a senior legislative representative at Earth Justicia. Laura was co-founder of Lesbianas Unidas, and in 1984 became Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos' first lesbian president and the group's third. She went to co-found Llegó, which became the nation's first and only national Latino LGBTQ organization in the country. Laura is featured in the groundbreaking book on Latino LGBT history, Queer Brown Voices, and she is proud to be joined here tonight by her daughter, Andrea, and dear friend and inspiration, Dolores Huerta. I'm gonna let Laura do a shout out to Dolores because I know that they're very good friends. So we'll get to that recognition. David Gonzalez, bienvenido, David. Was a Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos GLLU's first president, secured its nonprofit status, and founded UNIDAD, GLLU's newsletter. He recently retired from 33 years of teaching science at high school in Silver Lake, where he resides with his husband and their 2 huskies. Yes, our fur babies. We love our fur babies. Veronica Flores. Bienvenida, Veronica. She is the CEO of Rising Communities, formerly Community Health Council, serving the greater South Los Angeles area. She's been a social justice activist since the age of 14 and has founded organizations, built entrepreneurship opportunities for folks of color, particularly women, and has authored and co-authored several publications. Felicidades. Bienvenida. Lidia Otero. Buenas noches, Lidia. Yeah. Lidia prefers they, them pronouns. Their newest book, LA Interchanges, a brown amp queer archival memoir, is scheduled to release in late July, where Otero weaves a gripping narrative of personal becoming amid the political and cultural currents of the 1980s in Los Angeles. Otero's parallel story of working as an electrician offers a unique vantage point of a city in the midst of restructuring, as their labor contributed to building some of the most iconic structures in Los Angeles, such as the U.S. Bank Tower. Nothing small in Los Angeles, right? Universal Studios City Walk and the Metro Rail. Bienvenida. Roland Palencia. He's currently a professor at Cal State University of Northridge. And in 2001, he was honored as a local hero by KCET, a PBS affiliate. Who would have thought that so many years later, he would have a film featured on PBS. He is an award-winning executive producer. His film credits include Invisible, Bambi Salcido's Story, and UNIDAD, Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos. He is a former Bruin. Do we get a shout out for the Bruins? And received his master's in the humanities from Pacifica Graduate Institute in Montecito. And last but not least, Geneva Fernandez. We would also like to acknowledge Geneva Fernandez, who we lost last year. Yes. Un aplauso for Geneva, who was a very big part of GLLU. I want to acknowledge tonight, she is represented tonight by her nieces and her sister Monica, Andrea, Kat, and Spanish. Geneva is here with us in spirit. Please stand up. Before I get started with this phenomenal panel, and by the way, I'm going to cut you off on time because I know you have a lot to say. I want to please stand up if you had something to do or were part of this film in one way, shape, or form. I do want to recognize those of you out there. Please stand up. Any of you?
You know, if you were
GLLU members. Perdón, GLLU. GLLU members? Yes.
Yes.
My first question goes for the GLLU leaders. GLLU played a very pivotal role in your lives. How has being part of GLU helped you and your community to this date? Who wants to start from our leaders? Laura, let's start with you. This way you can recognize Dolores as well.
Sure. Well, Dolores is here, which means everything to me. Dolores called me from the road and said, "We're just crossing the grapevine, but I'll be there." She drove down from Bakersfield with her son to be here for this, so that means a lot. That, I always talk about Cesar being the first civil rights leader to speak out publicly in support of gay rights. And every time I tell that story, Dolores says, "That was supposed to be me. I was supposed to go that day, but I couldn't." But she's been here ever since, and it just means everything.
Gracias, Dolores. Muchísimas gracias.
What was the question?
How has GLU been helped you in your community this day and age?
Well, I think because of that experience, I have, and all of us have unapologetically gone into every space saying, aquí estamos, exactly who we are. This is who we are. And if you cannot handle us as not only queer, as women, as Latinos, then we don't want to be here, and you don't deserve us.
Gracias, Laura. Who wants to go next? Veronica?
I think it's been ongoing. I think that's one of the things about this whole group, and a lot of the people that are here, that were part of that, is I agree with how we show up, as Laura says, and we show up in that way, and that's one of the things that makes me the proudest. We also founded other organizations, that part of what I think happened to us is we saw the need, we jumped, just like the documentary really talks about, but wherever we went, we did the same thing. So for me, when I left in '94 and I moved to New York, I went to work with an organization, the HIV Law Project. And I went there and I liked the offer because they were the organization that was suing the CDC. Because the CDC had a description of the symptoms that people were getting. And so if you were a white man, there were certain symptoms you got, and so then therefore you qualified for a lot of the support, right? Because people were ill. However, for women were dying of all kinds of side effects related to HIV, and none of those were being recognized. Men of color were dying for a number of side effects, and those were not being recognized. So therefore, they would not qualify for benefits. So we sued the CDC, and we won. And that changed, the definition of HIV in this country. And so I think we all sort of took that on. And then working with some other folks in New York, because I just felt like this is how we organized in LA. We organized and we launched the Audre Lorde Project, which is still going on in New York. And that was a queer, people of color group that we launched really specifically around police brutality against the queer community and people of color community. And that's still going on in Brooklyn. And so I'm very proud of how this organization, GLU, gave me the platform to be who I am today. And so Yeah, huge.
Thank you, Veronica. If you looked at some of the early materials that they produced, it was camaraderie, it was socializar, cultura, fiesta, pero política. Política was a very, very important part of what you all did too. Who wants to answer the question, how pivotal GLU was being a part of in your lives important now? Luis?
I moved to Los Angeles in 1975. I'm from Bakersfield. And I remember when Stonewall happened. I was still a kid. But in my mind, when Stonewall happened, I felt like, oh, we won. Liberation has happened. So from then on, I just felt I'm liberated. Now, if the rest of the society is still not wanting to accept it, that's on them, but I'm liberated. And then, so that's how I lived. And then punk happened, and I really became liberated because I didn't have to ask permission for anything ever again. So GLU was a natural progression for me to continue my troublemaking post-punk. And then also, like you mentioned earlier, it was a community, it was friendship, because we just hung out with each other. We were always together. And it never occurred to me, but it was all volunteer, like Roland said in the film. But I just never thought of that, like, oh, I should be getting paid or nothing like that. No, we were just there, we were doing it, and we were having fun, but we were working hard, and raising our consciousness and trying to spread that around to everyone else in the city.
Thank you, Luis. Anybody else? Rita? David? Adelante, perdón.
Yeah, hi. I want to extend that about the camaraderie and all of that. We did have all of these projects eventually spring out from the beginning. And maybe it was kind of, frivolous when I was talking about, meeting people and sleeping around and all that. Everybody did it. It's just I was proud of it. But one of the ideas I think behind the group was, let's have another place other than just a dark bar to meet people, right? And then, you're going to meet people who are activists, who have the same kind of thought process, who share cultures. Although what was really interesting to me, I'm a second-generation Chicano, was how much I did not know about all the different Latin cultures in the country and the world. I think Geneva mentioned that she learned how to merengue. Well, I learned how to salsa from Jose Ramirez, and I was so happy that I finally got to understand how different they were, our Puerto Rican friends, Chilena, everybody, third and fourth generation. That was how it really affected me as well, also giving me a place to practice my leadership skills. I had a little bit of experience being in the Peace Corps, but that really solidified it. When you're in charge of an organization with everybody else, it gives you that confidence. Also, it gave me confidence to be completely open in society. And starting with my family, they accepted me from the very beginning, but if they wouldn't have, I had my GLU family to back me up. And unfortunately, there were a lot of GLU members who did not have family members that were supportive. So we were their support. We were their family. And I think those at the beginning, before we started branching out into all of our other projects, that was the heart and soul of the group.
Thank you, David. Lydia, Rita?
Is this on? Hey, y'all. I'm kind of glad that I get to speak after David because I appreciate this. I think we all were organizing around anti-racism. We all had a social and a political consciousness. But in terms of sexual politics, we were doing things differently. And we were engaging in sex differently. And for different than previous generations, we were choosing how to engage in sex and who to engage with and have sex with. So I think it's an undercurrent in the film, but I think even when there's hints of promiscuity, I totally dig that. because it was total, we were all about that, right? That's what we were trying to open up and be. So I think that's really important. Not that that helped me become who I became, but I think that environment was really important to establish, because in our families and with this Catholicism that most of us were raised under, that finally we had a choice. And I hope that with younger generations, you know, they feel a lot stronger about those choices. But we were making these choices that were cutting edge back there for brown queers.
We were among the first generation of joyful homosexuals who were visible, right? Before then, it was a matter of shame. And we were not that. We were not ashamed of who we were and who we loved and who we had sex with. And that was radical.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Rita, faltas tú.
Well, it gave me lifelong friends, and that means a lot to me. That I met the greatest people. That it was a family, but it gave me a purpose. Prior to GLLU, I didn't think I had a purpose. I was just doing my thing, but I had a purpose and I had a vision, and I know what I needed to do, and I'm doing it now.
Thank you, Rita. I'm going to have some questions for the filmmakers as well, and Roland is in the two categories because he's a leader and he's also part of the filmmakers. But you all started a movement that was so incredibly important to have your voices heard. Nowadays, we call that advocacy activism. What advice can you give to those who are doing the work that you started to do from then to now? No había Wi-Fi en ese entonces. No habían computadoras, Mac, ni los celulares. They really, through all the adversity and what you were able to do is incredibly, incredibly important. What did you learn and what can we teach the generations who are doing it now? Any one of our leaders want to go first?
Sure, I'll go. First, I want to acknowledge some family that I have here. My brother Guillermo, Nidia, and my niece Sally, and they know how important my gay and lesbian LGBTQ queer community is, and so they always supported me on that, and I'm just deeply grateful that they've done that. I think that there's something to be said about blissful ignorance. Like, I think personally, and maybe I'm speaking for some of us, because we were like in our early 20s, and I remember Jose Ramirez was 28, so he was our elder. and we listened to whatever he had to say. We just went with that. But we, and many expressed in the movie, like, we didn't know what we were doing, but we learned. And I think that will be advice that I will give to the new generation. Do not be intimidated by not knowing. As a matter of fact, you should be motivated by the fact that you don't know. Because as you take action, and as you learn, and as you collaborate and converse with other people, you will gain the knowledge, the skills, certainly the momentum, the courage, and the impetus, to make it work. I mean, we started GLLU, in some little in Jose's office. I mean, we didn't have, we didn't know of foundations, right? I mean, we just, philanthropy, like, how do you spell that, And, and all our movements, I mean, UFW, I mean, they didn't have an endowment, to start their struggle. And, these are like, some of the most vulnerable, marginalized people. So the biggest resource that you have and the biggest resource that you want to tap into is your own sense of dignity and justice and being able to just self-propel and make it work. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be 5 people that meet every month, and then have some other 5 people meet every month. And then things will click, And there's, in these movements, there's a lot of synchronicity, serendipity, coincidences, and that's really like the gold mine that many of us are not aware of. So I hate to sound like Nike, but just do it.
Yeah, no. I think you make a really good point, Roland, and I would be remiss if I did not recognize his incredible fundraising skills, because without that, projects like this cannot be made. So another shout out for our sponsors, our partners, those who opened up their pocketbooks. My dad used to say, "Papi, ¿por qué no podemos ir a Disneylandia?" And he would say, "Por dos razones, hija. Una, dos." That's why we couldn't go, by the way. So who else wants to answer the question on what advice do you have for those who are now in the movement, advocating and continuing the fight in la lucha?
You know, if you're not punk, become punk and do not ask permission, because none of us asked permission.
No.
We just did it. So, yeah, you don't have to ask permission.
In that spirit of not asking permission, I think the other part was that inclusivity. And we didn't, although this was Gay and Lesbian Latinos Unidos, and it was about Latinos and Latinos organizing for us and for other Latinos, we always worked with people of color. We always worked with groups like the United Farm Workers and, Cespedes, and, we always worked with other groups because we're not isolated. And so we were anti-racist. And as Lydia said, that was our work. And a lot of us came to the table with that kind of work behind us. And so I would say today, that there's a declaration right now of the highest risk for us is today. We're in 2023, and queers have to be afraid of being. I live in Pasadena now, and so some people are afraid, and then I know Pasadena, right? So, but it's very quiet there, and so my wife and I were like, this is a moment where we need to be very public and not be afraid. And I don't care anymore. How many times have any of us been beat up because of who we are? I'm not afraid anymore. I would say to young people today, or whoever is organizing, and I'm not just talking to young people, because a lot of you all out there need to be organizing too. We all do, because this is our lives. This is the lives of our nieces and our nephews, of the younger population that just is having such a hard time. So I would say we got to stick up for each other. And so be bold. Don't be afraid. But and find your tribe, because you got to call out, as I was saying. You got to call out to others. And when we called out to each other, we were protecting each other. So you got to have a tribe. So that's what I would say. You can't do it alone.
David?
I would also say networking. That was our catchphrase back in the 80s, networking with all the other groups. At the time GLLU was forming, there were suddenly a lot of organizations forming. There was an organization called MEGLE, which I don't really remember. It was the minorities, but mainly African Americans, I think. Right, and there was Asian Pacific, Lesbian and Gay Friends of Asian Pacific. So, you work with all these different groups, and that makes you even stronger. And maybe it's gotten fragmented now, but fortunately, the gay movement, the lesbian movement has included the trans, included queer, included questioning, all of those different things. That's what you've got to do if you're going to make any kind of mark in society.
Thank you, David. Very, very important.
Lydia's been trying to say something, and then
It's not important, but can you hear me? So I was having this conversation with a young person when we were entering. And sometimes I think that these kinds of documentaries make it seem like this is how it should be done. Well, this is how it should have been done in 1980 and early 1990s, right? It's not, it's a different time now. And I think that young people inspire me because they're doing something that's very radically different in many ways. And sometimes it looks like they're not doing what we did, but they are engaging in change in a way that we don't specifically note or see. And because of the social media, I hear this all the time. Oh, young people, they're just on social media. Well, I think they may be on social media, but they're working on something that we weren't working on. They're working on changing consciousness in a way that's different than we were. So I want to make sure that young people don't use us as a metric or a measurement or a standard, and always take risk, because all of us will agree on one thing, and that one thing is being different is a good thing.
I totally agree with that, but I also don't mind being an example. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, you have, what I tell young people is you have ancestors. You know, you're not, you may be doing it in your own way, but you're not doing it for the first time, and you're not alone. And, you know, what I tell people is, you know, I hear you complaining to me about this organization or people aren't taking your, start your own fucking organizations, right? That's what we did. Like, if you cannot wait around for other people to take your needs seriously. You have to take them seriously. And when you start your own organizations, you then can engage from a position of power and a position of equality. And I feel like for us, that was our secret sauce, right? I remember, you know, when we first started talking about Bienestar, we were having a meeting and we were talking about boycotting APLA. And it's like, screw that. You know, why are we going to put our energy into demanding that they do for us when, you know, just like, it was a big part of our secret sauce, is to decide to do for ourselves.
That's very, very, very good advice. And as we saw in the literature, they were fighting Assembly Bill 1. I'm not sure what that was. Prop 187, which we know was super hateful, but now 2023, we're fighting hundreds and hundreds of bills that continue to attack our community. And we need to stay active, and we need to make our voices heard. So learn from this group who are very early on with typewriters and very limited resources. We're fighting the good fight, seriously. My question for the filmmakers, 2023, big screen, streaming, whatever you see, we are not properly represented. We just don't see ourselves behind the camera, in front of the camera. I used to produce news, by the way. Putting together a 90-second piece took me all day to do. These guys did an hour, by the way, okay? And that is formidable. Why now? Why has a story of GLLU and the fight for LGBTQ in the Latino community, why has it not been told before? That's for you, Gregorio, or Mario, or Roland.
I mean, why hasn't it been told? I think one of the questions that we asked Roland was that question, why hasn't the GLLU story never been told? Roland was interviewed for LA Queer History, and then we looked at each other and we're like, this story needs to be filmed. Who's going to do it? You know, maybe we should consider doing it. And it's... I'm 23 years into this industry. Nobody has really opened the door for me. I am doing what I can to push my own career forward, and to collaborate with people like Gregorio on doing these kinds of films. And I'm really connected to all of your struggles and all of the things that you guys did for us. And at the time when I was a young gay person coming to terms with my identity, I wish I would have known about you a little bit more. I did listen to Radio GLLU, and you know, there were publications out there that were so limited, but I think in the conversation that Gregorio and I were having was like, this would have made a huge difference for us when we were young gay men coming out. And we have the skills, we have the talent, we have the energy, and we're taking the energy of our elders and those who came before us and propelling this forward. As you said, there are hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills across the country, I think over 500 now. So the fight and the struggle is not over, and the least that we can do for film, from the film side, is inspire young people to generate the inspiration, the messaging that the Glue story is, and push it forward. I'm really thankful that we're on a channel like PBS, because I grew up watching that and watching gay content when I was in my teens, and that made a huge difference for us when we were younger. So I'm really, really proud of that partnership.
Felicidades, by the way. That is not, one thing is getting the funding, filming, getting it done, but then having all the awards that you've picked up so far, and then having PBS to elevate and amplify the great work that you're doing. Let me hear from you about the first question that I had.
Yeah, everything what Mario said, and I think that's why we work together so much, is because we have very similar visions and very similar ideas. I'm from Southern California, but I moved to Seattle when I was 18, and I came out in Seattle. And Seattle was very white at the time. It still kind of is. So there was like maybe 5 Latinos that I knew. And every time someone mentioned a Latino, oh, do you know this guy? He's Latino. Like, no, I don't know him. But so everything I saw when I was coming out as a gay man in the 90s was white, which is like what you said in the film. And the magazines had white muscle men on the covers. The movies were about white men. Everything was just white guys. And so I thought that that's what being gay looked like, or was supposed to look like. And I didn't fit that. So I felt like I did not fit into the gay community, even though I was a part of it. So, and I wanted to make films, and in the 90s, there wasn't any really great gay films that I really related to. And then later on, I realized basically what Laura was just saying was like, you have to create your own opportunities. And that's when I decided that, well, I'm gonna start telling my own stories, and stories that I wanna hear. And I think that people like me wanna hear, because if I had something when I was 19, 20, very confused about my identity, that I could look to, that I could have looked to, like Glue or information, I think it would have been a little easier and a little different, but we're here now. So, but that's kind of how I ended up here. So.
Great stories, and I know there are great futures in what you have going. And for everything that you were seeing, no sabían que todo es más rico en español, con una cumbia y con salsa. Así es que de lo que se perdían, ¿verdad? Do you feel, this is the same question for the filmmakers, that the film community has supported you through this journey?
No, absolutely not. It has taken somebody like Roland to really propel us to think about connecting with communities and that we'd never thought about. Obviously, the platform PBS gave us a little bit of a doorway there. But they look at us and we're not part of the conversation. And funding, grants has always been difficult to apply to. Hopefully now going forward, that's not going to be the case. But I know that there are people in spaces, film spaces, and we're probably just a few minorities still in the room. And I think you have to be in a privileged position to want to be a filmmaker, because it's an expensive process to undertake. So, I've worked full time. Gregorio has worked aside, and we've been doing this on the side. We're trying to make this happen. So we're hoping that we're going to open the door for the people behind us to be able to tell our stories.
I would just say, even which film festivals would and would not agree to show this film was a struggle.
I'm sure it's who you know in order for you to be seen and enter and be part of a film festival.
A lot of times it is, yeah. Our focus for this film in festivals was LGBT, obviously, and Latino festivals. We got into a lot of the LGBT ones, but we only got into one Latino film festival. And that was really disappointing, because just as somebody says, I think it was Laura who says that we wanted to show white people that gay people look like us too, I wanted with this film to show Latinos that Latinos look like us too. And there's still obviously work to do in that arena, because it was very disappointing. You know, even we tried a little bit in like Mexico and other places, and just no interest for some whatever reason. But
For those of you who work in getting funding from foundations and other entities that are large, there's a whole movement to decolonize them. Yes, the word is decolonize them because they continue to fund programs that don't necessarily look like us. So that's still a movement. And Roland, I think you would know that for sure. What message do you have for future filmmakers that want to storytell?
I just wanted to say something really quick, just based on what Gregorio said. We now have our cameras, we have our computers, and no one's going to stop us. We're going to keep moving.
Bravo!
yeah, and also just sorry to piggyback off that. When we did LA Queer History, Mario and I, and then another producer, Richard, I was involved with it from beginning to end for 10 years. It took me, and Mario came in, I think he was around 8 years, and then Richard came in, I think he was around 5 or 6. But that's how difficult it was. You know, we would get money, and then we wouldn't have money, and then we would get money, then we wouldn't have money. And then I think as queer Latino men from just working class families, we didn't have any connections in Hollywood or anywhere at all. And like Mario mentioned, when we got Roland to executive produce this film, he opened up a door to organizations that we never would have thought would have supported us, and many of them are here tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, and I know that a lot of these organizations, this was the first film that they supported. So that meant a lot to us, that they saw the value in this, and hopefully that they can continue to see value in other films like this and continue to support those as well. So it was difficult for us in many ways, and hopefully it will get easier. And you know, when we started this film, I basically was like, I'll just do it on the side for free, you know, whenever I have time, we can get it done. And Roland from the very beginning said, no, you guys are going to get paid, and I'm going to raise money so you can pay yourself. Because we were used to doing it we were used to not getting paid. We were used to making films because we wanted to make them, not because we were making money. You know, we were telling stories because we felt they needed to be told. So thank you, Roland, for that.
Yeah, that's super, super important. And it's also dándote el valor de todo lo que sabes and paying yourself. It's something that we never really looked at. Of course, look at your talent. Look at what I walk away so incredibly inspired. I have one more question, then we're going to have some closing statements from everybody. This is for the filmmakers and the glue leaders. What do you hope audiences will take from hearing the stories of the glue leaders featured in the film? Rita, let's hear from you.
Wow, I don't know how to answer that one, really. That's a tough one. I just hope that, you know, that we made a difference. At the time we were doing this, we were just doing it. We didn't know that we were doing history. We were just surviving. We were just trying to make it. We were trying to save our lives, really, because with the AIDS, and then a lot of women, you know, Latino women, it was hard for a lot of us. Culturally speaking, too, a lot of our families rejected us. And we had a family, so I don't know, we had fun, but we knew we had to do something in our community because people were dying. And not just from AIDS, there was suicide. People died because they were gay. And we were able to make them feel like you belong. I mean, I was one of those people. I thought I had no value. And I think the film shows you that we gave each other value. And that's why I go back to the vision, and it gave me a purpose. And the young people too, because just that we were there, and we hopefully we were a stepping stone for other organizations.
You definitely were, by the way. Leaders, anybody else want to answer that question?
When I first saw the film, the very, very first time, we were asked, what did you think seeing the film. And I said this, not to dismiss it or make fun of it or not, respect its value of what we did, but I thought, oh, that's right, I did that, And it wasn't like I'd forgotten, but it's just that when that time came for me to move on, I continued doing what I was doing in GLLU, just, in other areas. So I think all of us, all of you, whatever stage you are in your life, continue doing those good troublemaking things that you've been doing, or if you haven't started, then start, and continue doing it, because I know all of us have. I'm very proud to say that my pal here, Lydia, is actually Doctora Otero.
Bravo. ¿Quién falta?
I just want to give a plug to Louis and his photography. If it was it was so important. When I think about this documentary, part of the reason that it's able to work so well, I mean, of course, Gregorio, you performed your magic and pulling it all together, but Louis, as a photographer, was critical because we have these images of those times. And I think that when Louis was always around with his camera, it's like, here's Louis again, It's like, okay. And then he'd put his timer and we had to stand there because he wanted to be in the photo. I mean, sometimes we didn't see the importance of that, right? But now we do. And, he was the GLLU photographer, and that means a lot now, more than it did then.
We call those assets now when we're building a film. But seriously, Luis, what we saw, and have it, of course, with the vision of Gregorio, but to see what you captured, by the way, is you were capturing history and you didn't know it at the time. Yeah. So gracias for that. Anybody else? Filmmakers too.
Go ahead.
Well, two things. One is that the work should be joyful. And I know it's really hard sometimes, and it isn't always, but when it is, remember that, you were just very lucky if the work is joyful. I think that's one of the things that kept us working so hard, right, it wasn't just a grind. It was a grind, but it wasn't just a grind. It was also a heck of a lot of fun and love, and one of the things that I didn't think of the first time I saw the shorter version of this is the toast we gave at the end. We all had bottles of water. That is not how we organize.
It was tequila.
And beer and smoking weed, but it was a different time. But it was joyful. So, if you're very lucky, the work is also joyful. And I think it's important because the work is hard, to look for that joy, to be sure to create that joy, because that fed us. The music fed me, the food fed me, the language fed me. And so it's important to also feed yourselves as you're doing the work. The second thing is, you will get old too. I mean, we were kids, and looking at some of us now, it's almost like shocking. It's like, the fuck?
Wait a minute, we still look good.
All right, yeah.
Okay, what's your point now?
Well, I don't know what my point is. That, life, we didn't realize what we were doing. We really didn't. We had no idea. And that also you might not realize now that what you're doing is important, or that what you've done in the past is important and will have meaning and impact other people's lives. But I can promise you, we never thought that. So keep doing what you're doing. And I want to give a shout out to Veronica's wife, right there, Luis, Margarita, Luis's husband, Kenny, and my daughter, Andrea. You saw that little girl on my lap? My daughter, Andrea, is here.
We used to babysit her.
Yeah. She used to crawl around under the tables. She was there the whole time I was there in GLLU. And somebody you didn't see in the film, who was always there too, was my mom. Yeah. all of those fancy glue events that we did, my mom was my date. And yeah, I just wanna call out my mom to be here.
I do want to mention that we had the best parties at Geneva's house.
Or as David would say, networking, correct?
So can I just say something
Please,
really
of
quickly?
course.
As Mario and I had mentioned earlier that, we wished we had something like this when we were growing up. To that point, we have two very incredible young people here that are helping us put together a GLU website that's dedicated to GLU, and it's going to have everything we can get on there. Videos, a link to this film, photos, a lot of stuff you see up here on the screen in the slideshow. And I want to, if you could stand up, Maria and Elias, they are working on it.
Yes,
Bravo.
yes,
They're
yes.
volunteering their time to
Yes.
do this. They're doing an amazing job. And if there's anybody here that has a photo or anything that you think might go in the GLU Archive website, please talk to them afterwards, and because we're still looking for materials. So, thank you.
Any closing remarks from anybody?
You know we have a reception, so.
Yeah, yes, but I want to hear. Veronica?
Yeah, I think, one thing I would like to add is, which was really critical for me, and I know for some of my sisters here, is that we were seen. And nothing feels better than to be seen. And for you to see others. And so that's been something that I got at GLU and at LU that never went away. And so I've carried that with me. And so I want to give a shout out to my team members who are here today because they are carrying that legacy and they continue to do that. So if you guys could just stand up for 1 minute.
Please stand to be recognized. Yes.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. And so I would say, just remember that just as much as that the film, I think, gives that, and just as much as we all appreciate being seen, that we need to see others and minimize the judgment. That's what I think I got out of
Thank you
that.
very much.
As we're closing here, I just want to acknowledge, if anybody has a birthday in June, please stand up, especially Roland. So I want to
Veronica, Roland. So are we Geminis or are we Cancers? Just curious.
Geminis.
Okay.
Well, here we go.
Birthday's tomorrow.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, everybody. Happy birthday to you.
Muchas felicidades. That was me whistling como una arriera de Mexico, as my father would say. How many have ever seen Roland turn 50 Shades of Red, by the way? Seriously. Let's give the leaders of GLU and our filmmakers a round of applause. Truly. Yes, definitely. Truly a standing ovation for letting their stories be told, to Gregorio, to bringing the story to us. Don't forget, it's on PBS. Tune in. Tomorrow it's broadcasting, but you could probably see it over and over for the entire month of June. And only until we see it, because there's a little thing called ratings, that it's people know how many people are watching. Please share it with your family and your friends. We do have a reception coming up next. What is it, a block away?
It's about a block and a half away. It's called Grandmaster Recorders. It's on the rooftop, and it's going to be fun. There's going to be free food. And please go because we paid for it.
Yes, absolutely. Gracias a todos.
Thank you.
Buenas
Can we
noches.
leave our cars in
Thank
the
you,
parking lot, or
Alfonso.
do we have to move them? No. For the reception?
And just one other thing, the film is going to be streaming on PBS for 3 years.
Yay, there we go.
3 years. Show it in your classrooms, we really want people to see it. So 3 years. Watch it again.
So there was a question about the parking. No, the parking closes at midnight. So as long as you're out of the parking lot by midnight, you're fine. So you don't need to move. You can that's the one on Iper. That's the one that I'm referring to. Okay, so just.
Buenas noches, señoras y señores, con ustedes, Andrea, cara cortada, ofreciéndoles en exclusiva lo peor.